Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Doug Cook. I'm a NOFA Mass board member, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Cooperative Food Processing in the rural Midwest with Jeff Hake. Jeff operates Funk's Grove Heritage Fruits and Grains, a diversified small farm in central Illinois with his wife and brother-in-law. He was also the co-manager of the Central Illinois Farm Fresh Enterprise Development Cooperative, FarmFED Co-op, from March 2020 to November of 2021, and now serves on its board. He was born and raised in Massachusetts. Cindy Jackson, who is a co-presenter, is not able to make it here today, and we send her our well wishes. Before we jump in, I have a few slides to present to you. This first one here is about our equity slides. And we are first trying here at NOFA Mass to strengthen our commitment to racial equity and justice by examining whiteness and dismantling systems of white supremacy that are part of many dominant systems, including our agricultural and food systems. We also want to honor the indigenous land stewards who are the original occupants of the land that we are currently living, farming and residing. Please use this link to the native lands map to find the area that you're currently inhabiting and learn more about the folks who are still there. And as well, we want to call everyone to action. We, especially white allies and co-conspirators, want to assist BIPOC-led organizations, and those actions are listed here on our slide. Oops, if I can get to it. So we are offering BIPOC members who are attending, presenting, and hosting this workshop from land that was managed and inhabited before European colonization, and to please take a moment again to find your spot on this map. As well, we want to go through our Zoom norms here. We'll make every effort to get your questions answered during the workshop. Feel free to use the chat feature to comment and ask questions during the workshop. I will be monitoring those questions, and I can bring them back at the end so we can have a conversation. To speak, during that question period of time, you're invited to take yourself off of mute by pressing the speaker button, but then please take yourself off the speaker, put yourself back on mute when you're done speaking to preserve sound quality for everybody. We are grateful to all of our sponsors who have made our work possible. So we encourage you to visit our vendors. Some of them are also our sponsors, and we want to make sure that you know more about all of these great organizations that are helping to make this winter conference a success. As well, we encourage you to visit our auction. It is live until Sunday evening, and there are some amazing items. So I have a few eyes on, myself, including those oysters. So, no bidding against me, just kidding. As well, we want to make sure that you have all of that information, and you can go check out our auction at this link that I will put in the chat in a second. That as well, I mentioned our virtual vendors. These are all the folks, so feel free to go check them out. There's some pretty cool discounts on some of their products. And with that, I have the great pleasure to turn it over to Jeff, who will we'll get to explore more about co-op work and all the good stuff.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Hake, and this is PJ, who's probably going to be here for at least some of this time. I think I'll just dive right in by pulling my slides up here. Give me 1 second. Great. Phew, it worked. Right. So I'm just going to be actually sliding through my slides here. It's kind of the best way I could find to share these. So just to introduce myself really quickly, I actually am from Massachusetts, even though I'm here in Central Illinois. I grew up in Franklin, Mass. Spent most of, until I was 30 or so living in New England. I do miss it, so say hello to it for me. I graduated from the Friedman School at Tufts, the nutrition school there, focused on agricultural practice and education. It's a great program. If you're looking for grad programs related to this kind of stuff, I would recommend it. But now I live in a town of 800 people. It's the village of McLean, Illinois. almost dead center in the state. I really love it here. I am the co-owner partner of FarmFED Heritage Fruits and Grains. We grow diversified grains and fruits. And the product that's on the right there is kind of our signature product, is our own pancake mix. It's our own wheat, and then also maple sugar from Funk's Grove Pure Maple Syrup, which is a business that's been in operation since the 1890s, run by my wife's family. I'm not going to talk about it more than that, but if you guys are interested, I love talking about our own farm too. But just so for context of how I got involved with this co-op project, local food systems and infrastructure are of huge interest and importance to me. They have been since I first got interested in farming. Small farms, rural economies now, especially now that I'm living as part of one, value-added products and things. New farmers, cooking and foraging are all things that kind of animate me in my work. So with that as a little more background about the co-op, I kind of want to start with a summary of what this cooperative is, and then kind of back up and talk about how we got to the point where we're at with the cooperative today. The basic idea of the FarmFED Co-op, which as Doug said is short for Farm Fresh Enterprise Development Cooperative, is to work with local produce farmers to buy their produce in bulk, and that's basically their whole job. In the most basic iteration of this cooperative, we would buy produce in bulk from local farmers. We take it in, we process it, we freeze it, and then we do the marketing, the distribution to local institutional buyers. So that's like schools and hospitals. It could also be retail outlets like grocery stores and things. So that's the very basic idea. So I want to start from the basic thing and get more complicated as we go. So the operations would look something like what you see here. This is just pictures pulled from a few different other operations that we kind of aspire to around the country. So what we would offer with our cooperative is processing for fresh fruits and vegetables grown locally, refrigerated and frozen storage, packaging and branding, using that logo you saw, and combining product from different farms, so aggregating so that we can distribute a lot of produce in bulk. And then also, because so much of a fresh produce processing line requires most of the parts of a commercial kitchen, we decided to build an actual licensed commercial kitchen into our planning, because that's also a need in our area for small farms to be able to scale up their value adding. I don't know what the situation in Massachusetts is with cottage food laws, but here having access to a commercial kitchen is a huge leg up to be able to reach larger markets with your value-added products. Whether you're a farmer or you're just a local food business owner, having access to commercial kitchen is a huge deal. Our farm has that, and we wouldn't be anywhere without that. So we also work that into the plans for this cooperative. So this is kind of the question I want to keep addressing as we go through. The cooperative the planning is all taking place in Mount Pulaski, Illinois, and it's one of thousands of towns in Illinois that this could have happened in. So I feel like this important question is, why is this happening in Mount Pulaski, and why is it happening now? I feel like there's something else to say about it. Oh, so as we go through, I sort of broken my text on these slides into two, just using formatting. Things that are in italics are items that were absolutely critical to this getting off the ground in the first place. So sort of like just elements that we couldn't have done without to get started. And then things that are in bold are the next steps that are the most important things that we've done. So you'll kind of see the transition from italics to bold as we go through, getting closer to the present moment. So just to give a little context, the map on the left there is showing where Mount Pulaski is. So it literally is almost the geographic center of the state of Illinois. So that's the red dot there is Mount Pulaski. And then on the right, you'll see a little closer up, we're kind of in the center of a lot of the downstate cities, smaller cities. So Bloomington, Peoria, Decatur, Champaign, Springfield. Those are all kind of important population centers around here. And just for a little more context, that little blue dot north of the red marker is McLean, Illinois, where I live. Also just worth noting that even closer than all those bigger cities is the city of Lincoln. I'll mention the city of Lincoln probably a couple times later. Pretty important to our efforts here. So that's the context. Mount Pulaski. It's in the middle of everything. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's a nice little town. 1,500 people, so twice the size of our town, but still a very small town. How we got started with this whole project is that we had our first meeting in February 2017. And when I say we, I was actually not involved. I actually hadn't even moved back to Illinois until 2018. So I was not involved in 2017 at all. But a lot of people who wound up involved in the cooperative started talking about this in 2017. And there was an early and ongoing interest in developing a fresh food cooperative of some kind, but without a really specific idea of what that meant. What they knew is they had a lot of interest in bringing some kind of grocery store back to their town. Mount Pulaski is like so many other towns, including my own here in McLean, where the last grocery store left sometime between 10 and 30 years ago, and it never came back. And then the more towns that happens in, the more and more the distance between grocery stores increases. Populations get older. They have decreased access to fresh food. If I want to get groceries now, I need to go 20 minutes north to the city of Bloomington, which isn't far, but we're pretty close to the city, and you can be way out in a rural area and not have access to fresh food. So they recognize the need for this. They also recognize that they had a lot of growers who were potentially able to sell to a cooperative like this. So they started talking about how they were going to do it. And one of the really critical things that they did early on was they applied for a grant to the EPA, which is strange because you always think of USDA grants as the one being for local foods and things. But they actually have this really cool grant called the Local Food, Local Places Grant. Now, the EDPB, you'll also see that acronym a lot. That's the Economic Development Planning Board for the city of Mount Pulaski. A really critical organization for all of this to have been successful. It's basically just a local governmental organization. It's a subset of the city council. And they're just a very proactive local organization. And without all of the work they put into making this happen, it might not have happened. So that's the thing I want to emphasize a lot, is having local government involved and be really actually interested and committed to it makes such an astounding difference to the success of a project like this. So EDPB applied for Local Food, Local Places grant through the EPA, and they got it. They were one of, I think, 20 organizations that year around the country to get one of these grants. And what the grant does is it does not provide funding directly, actually. What it provides is a planning process for the community facilitated by officials from the EPA. So there's a lot of pre-work that happens on the ground in the city in conjunction, remotely with EPA. And then folks from EPA came to Mount Pulaski for a week to hold a series of meetings with the community to get this conversation. Wow. Sorry, it's really icy here and I'm watching people slide around. That person almost crashed. Yikes. Sorry. So they came to Mount Pulaski for a week and held a series of meetings with the community. And I just want to emphasize here, I've been involved in an awful lot of organizations, institutions, been to a lot of public meetings for all kinds of different things over the past 15, 20 years. And I have never been to any public meeting of any kind where there was so much enthusiasm about an idea as when I went to the original public meeting held by EPA. It was in the Legion Hall, I think there, or yeah, the Legion Hall, American Legion. There were 80 people there. A couple of farms provided food, and it was cooked up by a local chef. Low key, but it was so enthusiastic. I left there. There was a dangerous thunderstorm happening, like incredibly dangerous Midwestern lightning, thunder, intense blinding rain, and I was driving in the middle of the night through these country roads, and I was just smiling the whole way back. I could not believe how positive and enthusiastic that community was. Really, really incredible. What they came away from that after this week of planning and subsequent work from EDPB was to establish two things: a cooperative grocery store and also a food hub. And I put food hub in quotes because they weren't clear on what exactly they meant by that. But they knew that they wanted something that would do a little more than just the grocery store. So they tackled the grocery store first because the idea for that was much more concrete, and they by the next.
It sounds like your audio cut out here.
PJ needed attention.
Jeff will be back.
All right, let me check in with Jeff. And this is a good time. If anybody's got any questions to write them out, we'll have time for verbalizing Q&As later.
Yes, thanks for dropping that in the chat, David. May have been one of those winter thunderstorms coming in, knocking at the power, or an icy branch coming down on somebody's line. Well, as an aside, I am noting Jonathan's comment that this could be a good model for chestnut processing, shelling, storage, and sale. And I'm with you there, Jeff, or Jonathan rather. Like, it's hazelnuts maybe is a burgeoning. Maybe I like hickory nuts of various kinds. I think hickories are the way to go for where I am. But again, they need lots of processing.
Jeff wasn't aware that he had cut out, so he's coming back in now.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember the name of it, but there is a chestnut cooperative. Where's that? In Ohio, I think, or West Virginia. Does anybody know what it is that I'm talking about? I can find the link for that.
I know of the Route 9 Chestnut Cooperative in Ohio. It's called Route 9.
All right, Jeff's back in.
We still see his presentation, which is interesting.
Yeah, he's in on a different account. Jeff, can you hear me?
I think. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yep.
I don't know. I have no idea what happened. Sorry.
Okay. No worries.
Oh, what was the last thing you heard?
Yes.
If you can bring back up the slideshow, I think we can orient to that.
Only the host. Can you add me as a host? I don't know why I'm not a host anymore. Sorry.
No worries.
For some reason, I can only make you the host. So you're going to be the official host. Once I make you the host, could you make me a co-host, Jeff?
I don't know.
Or David?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how to do that.
Zoom hiccups.
Sorry.
Great.
Do you guys recall the last thing I said?
If you can bring up the slideshow, I think we can reorient to that.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about how excited you were driving through the storm.
It's so good. So like, it's a personal favorite memory.
So you're one slide above this.
Was here?
Yep.
Okay. Was I talking about them starting the cooperative grocery store or not yet?
I think that's right where you're at.
Okay. So they successfully opened their cooperative grocery store just a year after this planning process, or a year and a half, in the middle of the early times of the pandemic, in June 2020. They pulled it off. It was really remarkable. It's not, it's not what you think of as a grocery store. It's a small little storefront on the village square, but it serves its purpose of being, a small town grocery store. It's got all the basics. It offers a lot of local food. It's got deli. It's a great little spot, and they pulled it off. And it's got the struggles that any small grocery store has, or a lot of small cooperatives have, where they're trying to make cash flow and all that kind of stuff, and figuring out their order of operations. But they did it. So that was like the first outcome that they wanted from this grant. The second thing was the food hub, which was it's going to take a little more work to figure out what exactly they wanted. So the way that got started was that, I was attending a lot of these meetings because I wanted to see if we could start our own cooperative grocery store of some kind in our own town at McLean, and trying to just learn along from their process. And also just because I was interested in food systems. Local food systems infrastructure is hugely important to me. So I was attending these meetings and trying to see if I could help and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, this very funny thing happened where I was at a meeting, and they were like, okay, we need to start like putting things down on paper, and we need to start like having more formal ideas. And I was like, that's great, but I can't keep coming to meetings and helping if I'm not getting compensated. Just like trying to be a good person to myself of valuing my time. And instead of talking myself out of attending meetings, they hired me instead. They needed someone to basically spearhead this whole thing. So they hired me and another fellow farmer, Kyle Reed, who's he's right there in Mount Pulaski. And he was involved early on with the cooperative project, with the grocery store. And so they hired the two of us to start putting together a plan for what would be some kind of food hub. And we were tasked with figuring out what exactly that was. So, put that in italics. The EDPB contributed $10,000, or they committed that, and then they were paying out from that to hire two co-managers to put this whole thing together. Hugely important to make that investment so early on. So in this initial project development phase, we did a lot of detailed interviews with producers and buyers. In my mind, there's sort of two different ways of figuring out what your market is and what your potential is. You can do a big, huge analysis, just looking at the entire market, getting data, and just looking at every single possible market opportunity. We were not really equipped to do that kind of thing. What we did instead was we did really detailed interviews with specific producers and buyers that we knew would be interested in working with us. So we came up with a detailed set of questions about what the capacity for production was for our local growers, what things they felt comfortable expanding on, upping their production of. So answers for that were things like sweet corn and bell peppers and broccoli, things that they felt comfortable growing a lot more of and selling at bulk rates. We asked similar questions of our local buyers, so school districts, hospitals, things like that. What are the things that Illinois State University, they're feeding a lot of students. what are the things that they would be interested in, produce they'd be interested in buying in bulk, with a lot of specifics. What prices would they be willing to pay? How much would they need per week? Just as many details as we could get, follow-up interviews, to really make the case that the market does exist for this and that we can match the market with our local producers. We also did research, including similar facilities and organizations in Illinois and across the US. We found some interesting models. There was one in Montana that really spoke to us, and another one in Wisconsin. There's also a place actually in Greenfield, Mass, that does similar stuff to us, but I was not able to get a reliable contact there. But I'm still interested in talking to them, so I might get back around to that. But that's a food processing facility there in Greenfield as well. Anyway, figuring out what kind of regulations and permits we'd be beholden to, what kind of business structure we'd like to eventually establish. We did look at a lot of options, but in the end, the folks we were talking to were most interested in being a part of a cooperative, separate from the grocery store, but a similar model of cooperative ownership. And of course, we're looking at grants and financing opportunities, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. And then, we formed a steering committee and got a lot of advisors together, and just had monthly meetings and kept putting information together. And this is our steering committee. I'm not expecting you to read this or anything. That's not really the point. But I put two things in italics here as well, just to highlight, that we had these buyers already early on board and how important that really is. So one here is Matthew Horton, executive chef at Illinois State University, just gave super helpful, detailed information on the needs of his dining rooms. And it's worth noting too that they had a early and ongoing commitment to buy local foods as part of their sustainability efforts on campus. And he was enthusiastic about this project because he, like so many other institutions that do these local buying commitments, struggle to actually make it happen. And this would make it so much easier for him to access produce reliably in bulk year-round. The other person here is Connie Crawley, who's the food services director for a local school district. This is one of those opportunities that is so rare that I would advocate for trying to replicate in any way possible, because of how absolutely essential it has been to our success so far. The Lincoln Elementary School District created a local buying program, and they are making it happen at great effort. And this is so unusual for so many reasons. For one, because school districts are generally just beholden to spending the least amount possible on their food, working with the lowest bidder. And the result is crappy food from wherever, as long as it's cheap. And then kids eat whatever is cheapest, which is too bad. So not only is it a school district that is bucking that trend or that obligation, but also it's a rural school district. I mean, Lincoln is a city, but it's not a big city. It's 15,000 people, 18. And they just decided they were going to do it. And having that kind of larger buyer in our area that is wanting to make this work, having that demand in place is just of profound importance. So I would encourage trying to find those champions before you get very far in your planning process, because trying to create that demand after is difficult. But just to show why they're so interested in this, they made this commitment to buy all this local food, and they were buying this local food. But the result of that was this, which is them getting together and just shucking corn outside during a pandemic with a bunch of volunteers. They committed to it, they're doing it. But when I told the director about this opportunity, she was like, oh, please, please make this easier for us. So, in this situation, what our facility would do would be shuck the sweet corn and get it frozen, or sell it fresh. But year round, you have it frozen, and then you just have sweet corn available to these cafeterias all year round. And you don't need to make all these stalwart, but volunteers who can be doing something else with their time if they wanted, just to make fresh food available to local students. So end of 2020, we got additional money from EDPB because we were finding that we just weren't done. Again, huge input. Can't replicate how important that is. And at this time, also, Kyle Reed was in his first year as his own farm for the first time. And he was getting stressed out, and he was feeling outmatched by how much there was to do. At the same time, my wife lost a bunch of her paid work for her freelancing editing. And so we hired her to replace Kyle on the project. And Katie's attention to detail and her business management skills, we could not have gotten to this stage without her. Neither Kyle nor I had that, and Katie does, and thank goodness that she was able to come on board at that time. At this point, we had found a space. There was a furniture warehouse in Mount Pulaski. And this is just also to note that Mount Pulaski is like so many other towns here, where it's not just the grocery store leaves, but just a lot of economic slow downturn of small rural towns. Businesses leave, people move away, towns shrink. And Mount Pulaski is just like that. McLean is like that too. It's just a rural Midwest pattern. So there was a 40,000 square foot furniture warehouse and store that had been in operation for 50 years. And it closed around the same time that we were starting this project. So we thought we had a good chance to get into that space, not use the whole thing. We were talking about using maybe 9,000 or 10,000 square feet of that space. And then we're trying to figure out who else could be using it. How are we going to purchase it? If someone else purchased it, how can we rent from them? How do we do improvements on a space that isn't ours? On and on and on and on and on. That being said, it was a really good fit for what we were trying to do. So we mapped that out. We acquired quotes and estimates for all kinds of things, and we put together financial schedules and really conservative projections for how we can make this work. And we finally put this whole plan together and presented it to the EDPB. I was nervous as hell because business planning is not my strong suit. I know food system stuff, and I know farm businesses and such, but this was a huge undertaking, and Katie and I were both extremely nervous. Gave this whole presentation, and they clearly already had in mind to approve it. They were very happy with what we'd put together, and we were basically told to go forth and keep working on it, and more funding would be on the way. So we kept going. Another critical thing, there's a business called Enel. They are an energy company. As you folks might know, wind turbines and wind farms are a huge deal out here. You drive through the Midwest and there's just more wind turbines all the time. It's hard not to travel down the highway without driving by a huge trailer with a fin on it. And Enel is one of those big companies. And I didn't realize until recently that Enel is the second largest electricity provider in the world, beaten only by the company that runs the grid for China. It's an enormous company, and I didn't really realize. So here's another interesting opportunity to keep in mind. They wanted to establish a wind farm in Mount Pulaski, and actually our now board president, he's a farmer. He farms 10,000 acres. He was one of the people who was opposed to there being a wind farm. It's a very, 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 very contentious topic around here, wind farms. And I don't even know which reason was his for wanting to oppose it, but he and a bunch of other community members started meeting with Enel to basically say, we don't want this. And then once it became clear that it was probably going to happen, Enel got enough access to property and all that kind of stuff, permits, it was, okay, well, you can do this, but what do we get in return? Because we will make this difficult for you. And basically Enel ended up committing a lot of money to economic development for the city of Mount Pulaski. And so in this next phase of the project of last year, we got a grant from them for $25,000. We didn't have to really apply for it. We just basically had to show our work, and they gave us $25,000 to go forth into the new year. So we took it and ran. So Katie and I kept working on this project as the managers. We formed an interim board for our cooperative. We registered with the state as a cooperative, and which basically required just us getting 5 owners to start. That's the bare minimum. And then we had to figure out where we were going to go from there with our cooperative as a larger group of owners. But while we were working in that, we also had to just pivot our plans. It was just becoming clear that the Stalls Furniture Warehouse was not going to become our home. The owner, even though he was, he had closed the store and was retired, he just wasn't making any effort to make it available to us at the time, and we just had to keep moving forward with something. So there was a hardware store that, unlike most businesses in our area, was actually doing well. It was moving to a larger space. So we started looking at that. And also the owner was very interested in what we were doing. It was very supportive and cooperative. So as they were moving out of their space, we started figuring out how we could possibly move into that space. But it's a 10th the size of Stall. So instead of having too much space with the possibility to expand and all that kind of stuff, we had just barely enough space. So 4,000 square feet is just a concrete block building. And it would be necessary to more than double the space. So a very different take on how to get this all started, but that's what we had to work with. So at this time, we also applied for an LFPP planning grant through USDA. It was a goddamn nightmare to apply for it, but we did it. It just, the writing of it was daunting, and it also, I will say also that there's planning and implementation grants. There's 2 different kinds, and it killed me to having spent all this time planning already to then write a planning grant. It feels like you're starting over, but the way I thought of it was sort of like advanced planning. Like there was still more planning that needed to happen, and this grant would help fill in all those gaps of the planning we hadn't done yet. So we applied for that in June of last year, and then we just waited and waited and waited. It took a very agonizingly long time to find out. So while we were waiting for that, the other major project was that we held an ownership drive for our cooperative. And I do want to talk some details about that because it went super well, and we're very proud of it. So I'll get to that in a second. But that also included an extensive graphic design campaign, and a big outreach process, press releases and social media and all that kind of stuff. And then at this time, the EDPB again contributed another $10,000 to get us through these final stages before we had any other form of income. The ownership, it was basically saying, we will get more funding if we have a successful ownership pledge drive. And the pledge drive went well, and we so they contributed another $10,000, basically keep paying Katie and me to work on this. So I'm going to break this down just a little more. First thing I want to note is that this is a really important thing. USDA AMS, Agricultural Marketing Service, has a wholesale facility design program. Actually, oh shoot, I should have put the name of the program on here. Sorry, if anyone's looking for the name of that program, or if you want to look it up, it was wholesale food facility design program, something like that, through AMS. It's a free program. They'll draw up basic floor plans for you for a food facility. I learned about it from another project that I've been researching. They were super helpful, super easy to work with. The only problem really was that they were suddenly everyone found out that they had this free program and they were overwhelmed. There's like an office of 2 people. But they drew up these plans for us. Prior to this, I was using pencil on graph paper because I'm old-fashioned and inept. And they listened to what we wanted, and then they drew up this plan for us. So this isn't like official specs. These are not architectural drawings, but this was super helpful for us to explain our project to the public and to work with in conversation as we're trying to design our whole thing. So highly recommend that. It is free. It's out there and it's great. This is the building we were looking at, just for a little context. Like I said, former hardware store, had been in place since the 70s. I think it was built in the 70s or the 60s. If you're looking at linoleum floor and you're hearing the time, you might know that there's asbestos under there. The other half of the building actually does not have the linoleum flooring on it. So we were trying to just figure out how little, hopefully none, of that flooring we have to take up. So it was, there's always complications. Asbestos was a huge, expensive proposition for us. Okay, so the ownership drive. We put together these, I'm just showing portions of some of the materials put together. We put together a letter to send out to community members. We put together a separate letter that was similar, but to send out to farmers, try to speak the farmer language a little more, like why this would be important to farmers, of like what this could do for expanding their markets and expanding their operations. And then we put together these pledge slips so people could not buy their owner shares, but they could pledge. So we basically did a whole pledge campaign first to make sure that we had enough people committed before we actually took anyone's money. That's a matter of trust, and that's a matter of our own security, knowing that we're actually on the right path. Just a quick breakdown, we had 3 different kinds of shares you could do. You do common B, so this is a $100 share. You get just 1 share, contribute $100, and then you're an owner of the cooperative. So then there's common A, which comes with a few more benefits, and then there's preferred shares, which was $1,000 per share, minimum of 5, and there are built-in payback for your preferred shares once we start actually operating, 4% interest annual. So we started putting this out in the world, and we just wanted to see how it would go. It went so much better than we had our goals set. Our goal was to have $100,000 pledged by October 1st of 2021. And that broke down to, and this was actually in our bylaws, we had to sell at least 50 preferred stock shares, 60 common A and 200 common B. So they were goals, but they were mandated goals by what we submitted to the state. And we got $100,000 pledged over a month earlier than we were expecting, and we met all our pledge goals. So, by that breakdown of 50, 60, and 200 shares of those different types, we had all those pledge goals met by September 12th of last year. So it took off so well and so fast. And it really just told us that we had an idea that people were interested in and that people wanted to be a part of. So in the end, we raised $147,550 just through owner funds. We had owners from all over the state. You will see that there's some folks from New England there. That's entirely my family, and also my grad school advisor. But still, the people were interested. And then we had one person from California, don't even know who she is. She was just interested and wanted to support it. And then we had a lot of folks from elsewhere in the country too. 156 founding owners purchasing a huge amount of shares, just absolutely thrilling. And then almost getting us up to today, just to round things off here, there's a program through our state treasurer's office that would probably be, if you're interested in doing this in your own state, would be worthwhile to find out if your state treasurer's office also has programs like this, where they will offer low interest loans to farms and farmer cooperatives. And so what they'll do is they'll give money to your local banking institution, and then at a very low rate, and then that local bank can only add on a certain cap on top of that rate. And generally, even with that cap, that rate is lower than what you're going to get for a traditional loan. I think our rate was 3.8%, something like that. So we took out that loan. We purchased that store. That 4,000. Sometimes talking to folks from back home in the Northeast, talking about property values. It's so there's so much more affordable here. So we bought that 4,000 square foot building. It's on a double lot. It cost $75,000, which was also a bit of a good deal with the owner as well. He wanted to get $100,000 for it, but he's willing to sell it to us for much less because he supported our project. We also hired our full-time general manager, which was such a huge deal. We only had 3 candidates for the position, but she had been following our project for a long time and was always very interested. She's a great fit for the job. It's really unfortunate that she had a death in the family. She couldn't be here. It'd be really great for you folks to meet her. But we hired the right person for the job. She has taken over from Katie and I. We are no longer co-managers. It's now in Cindy's hands. And I'm thrilled. In this time, we also got our website built by a volunteer owner. And we established our social media accounts. So if you guys want to follow us at FarmFED Co-op, we would love that. I'm actually still in charge of that. I haven't posted in a little while, but I'll get back to it soon. And then the last part of our planning phase, bringing us to the present, we got the grant. It's such a big deal that we got this grant. It's worth $189,000, and then we had to match with $50,000. But it basically just helps us fill in all the gaps for this next planning phase as we go into 2022. I did most of the writing of that grant. I was so proud of myself, but I never want to do it again. That being said, super important to the success of this project. If we hadn't gotten it, I'm not sure where we'd be. And we did contract with the FoodWorks group in Washington, D.C., which is headed up by Wendy Stewart. She's great to work with. I think she's done some work in New England as well. If you're interested to learn more about that, I'm happy to tell you, and also tell you the details of that grant. We also held our inaugural meeting of owners, and we elected our board. We've since then held our first meeting with our board, and now we're working on forming task force to figure out what's next and support our general manager however possible. So what is next for us? We might be pivoting back to the furniture warehouse after all. It looks like the owner might finally be up for selling, and there's someone else in town who is interested in buying it and then leasing it to local businesses like us. And so our board president is currently working on negotiating about that. It would in the end be a better fit for us, which I can explain why that is if you're interested. But we might be pivoting back to that, which might mean that we sell the building that we just bought, or that we keep it and put something else in that space, some other food project maybe, which would be awesome. We hope we can open our commercial kitchen somewhere by this fall. Every day goes by, it feels less likely to happen, but I'm trying to just keep optimistic about it. The processing line is unlikely before 2023. We're having the same supply chain issues and access to workers and that everyone else is. There's just a lot of outside forces that are slowing us down that we can't do anything about. And that's fine to just be at peace with. It's fine. What else? We might expand beyond freezing, might expand beyond produce. That's all yet to be seen. There's a lot of interest. Could it be working with meat instead? Could it be working with grains? Could it be developing more interesting branded products? Who knows? we're also developing a network of similar infrastructure projects in Illinois. And I'm trying to get more involved in that because there's so many other things that we can do. And if I can continue to be supportive of other projects in the state, in the same way that I'm doing presentations like this, I just want to share what we've done, and I hope it can be useful. And then the question in my mind is, can we keep this momentum going and make Mount Pulaski, of all places in Logan County, one of the poorer and more unhealthy counties in central Illinois, in the whole state, in the country? Can we make it a hub of local foods development? Can we basically turn this negative into a positive? The momentum is there, and I'm hopeful that we can keep it going. So last thing, key lessons that I've gained from this. Most important, someone needs to get paid. Someone has to get paid. It just doesn't happen. Kyle and I and Katie spent so many hours on working on this, and we still only got through planning. Just for like full disclosure, we got paid $40 an hour, and someone should get paid that much to put how much work. So someone who has some skill, and there's a lot of things I'm not good at, but there are some things I do know, and then I have my network and all that kind of stuff. Someone needs to get paid well. I just can't emphasize how important that is. And it helps, I think, if it's someone from the local community, but someone who also has the requisite skills to put together a project like this. It just, doing it for free doesn't work. In the same way that farming for free doesn't work. So a few other things. Grant research is a huge time suck. Not even just writing it, but just doing the research for it in the first place, trying to know what grants are the right fit, find any way to expedite it. And my policy suggestion is that there should be grant navigators or advisors at the federal and state levels, and not people who would know this program or that program. Someone who's just an expert on every grant program. Their whole job is just to look at your project and let you know if this grant program is the right fit, and if so, how. Is this grant program a strong fit for your project? Is it a weak fit? Should you spend time on it? How do you focus your application to make it be the best fit possible? Because we had to do that ourselves, and it took so much time. If someone you're working with on trying to form a cooperative gives you a bad vibe, just give them as little of your time as possible, or leave them out. It's not worth it. There's other people who are willing to help, or it's better just to have fewer people than to have someone who's going to keep pulling and distracting. Project can go off the rails with the wrong person, so just leave them out. Almost every part of the local food system needs rebuilding. We chose fresh produce because we have enough people around here, we felt, enough growers around here and enough buyers around here that match that to make it work. My point is just do your research, pick a path, but do it quickly and just start moving forward, because you can fix one problem and then you have to move on to the next one. Like there's so much to do. You can't really pick a wrong path, I guess. Get in the habit of seeing problems as opportunities. There's so many empty buildings around here, and lack of access to local food, and so many growth points for local farmers, and problems for farmers. Just all those problems can be opportunities if we just try to be optimistic about it. But again, you just have to pick which direction you're going to go in. Here's a really important one that I think could be contentious, because food is political. We hear that from Wendell Berry and 1,000 other people. Food is political, but also it can be nonpartisan, I swear. Everyone needs to eat. Kids, almost everyone can agree that kids should get to eat fresh food. We can agree, especially around here in some of the world's best topsoil, we can grow good food around here very locally, and there should be more of it. It's a reasonable idea. It's not radical. And embracing that can go a long way. I don't share the politics of most of my neighbors, and that's fine. I focus on food and feeding people well. And I think we've gone a long way by just embracing that, the fundamental nature of that. It transcends party lines and whatever else. I said pick a path and pick quickly, but after that, you have to move slowly and deliberately. Just keep pushing through the idea that you had and stick to it. Don't pursue shiny objects. Grants are really bad about that. They'll make you look at something and be like, well, that could be something we could do. I guess that fits, but we really need the money. Like, just don't. Again, it's like having a person who gives a bad vibe. Don't let yourself get off course, and go after shiny objects. And also don't become someone's shiny object, because then people who are trying to support you but expecting things will then divert you away from what you're trying to do. Be imaginative, avoid institutionalized thinking. People are like, well, you can't get the price points, to make the local foods work. And it's like, well, maybe you can. I don't know. Just don't let people with their boring thinking get in your way. There's more to do, and there's more imagination to be harnessed. And the last thing is just build community. Just be friends with the people you're working with. There's a bar across the street from where we would have our meetings with EDPB. We go over there and we would just relax and kind of talk about the project and kind of not. And it's super important to build community in that way. That's what I've got. That went longer than I meant, but I would really love to answer questions if
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
Have any. Stop my sharing.
Excellent. Yeah, everyone, you feel free to put your questions in on the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can take questions live. I'd like to start off with this first question. Could you describe the cooperative structure more in depth? For example, the investors own it, and how much does this include farms or farmers? And then I have a little follow-up to that. Go ahead.
Yep. So anyone can become an owner. I think it was technically like any U.S. citizen, U.S. resident can become an owner. So it doesn't have to be Illinois. It doesn't have to be farmers. It can be anyone. And I don't recall the exact. I don't know if we actually have the exact breakdown, but it's probably only about 1/3 to maybe a half farmers, and the rest are just concerned citizens, people who want to support the project. And a lot of the biggest dollars came from non-farmers, which makes sense because farmers don't have a lot of money, usually. So that's how it broke down. And the cooperative structure is the smallest share type is common B. Actually, there's technically common C, which we formed just so we could have those first 5 people invest. So I'm a common C owner. The share costs $50. We only had 5 available shares of that just to help us get off the ground so we could form our cooperative and then keep moving from there. But then when we opened it to the public, we there's an upper limit on how many shares are available of each one, but the total amount is like $1.1 million. And we're maybe we'll get there someday, but I'm not holding my breath. You have common B shares available for $100. You can get, well, I'll get to that in a second. And then there's common A shares, which are $500 a piece. And then there were preferred stock, which were $1,000 a share, and it was a minimum of 5 shares per person. And the preferred shares come with a 4% annual interest paid back. But those don't start happening until we're actually operational. So until we start buying produce from farmers, until we have a facility, basically, we're not obligated to start paying that back. But then we are obligated to start paying that back annually. So then no one person can have more than 10 shares total. So you can get shares of different types. I have 1 common C share and I think a bunch of common A shares. But they can't add up to more than 10 total shares. So a person who has 10 common B shares that they spent $1,000 on has the same amount of votes as someone who bought 10 preferred shares for $10,000. So if ownership is the most important thing to you and having a vote, you can get 10 of the smallest shares and you get 10 votes in the cooperative. So 1 share, 1 vote, up to 10 votes per owner. Does that answer the question, or is there? Oh, and we elected a board. We have a 9-member board, 4 officers. I'm the vice president now. As we were talking about before we got on the call, I've moved from a paid position to an unpaid position, which is a super smart career move. But that's our basic structure. And then we only have the 1 employee so far. Sorry if you hear the train noise in the background. We have just the 1 employee so far, and she reports to the board. It's a pretty simple cooperative structure so far.
And as you mentioned, your 1 employee, Cindy, do you envision like worker owner or employee owned aspects to this type of cooperative?
I mean, I would like to have that someday, but I mean, I think we're going to maintain our owners cooperative owned by the public. So I think we'll have that for now, but I mean, employees will be more than welcome to be owners as well. So there won't be anything restricting them from that.
And so is there any limit as to the number of owners potentially? Or
There is, I don't even know what that number is, but I mean, I think it's in the thousands, and we have 156 right now. So if we do another ownership campaign and somehow it goes even better than the first one, I might start worrying about that. But I mean, the thing about that too is that we also have the ability to adjust our bylaws and just get it run through the state, and we can increase the limit. And all those limits on share types and stuff like that, that is up to us. So when we can adjust those, as all we have to do is make sure that we're sticking with the rules that we made. And then we can just change the rules later if we vote on that as a board.
Yeah, feel free, anyone, to jump in if you have more questions specifically about the structure of the cooperative. I have some.
I have a non-structure question.
Yeah.
When you were looking at the buildings, whether it was the hardware store or the one you ended up purchasing, what were some of the requirements that you had?
I mean, there weren't any strict there weren't any buildings we looked at that were like, that won't work. You know, there were definitely some highlights on each of the buildings that we were wanting. So here's what makes the Stahl's burnt furniture warehouse a good fit. All concrete floors. It's 2 stories tall. It's so you can have a lot of stacking of pallets and things like that, which was if we're going to have refrigerator and frozen storage, I did want to be making sure that we could do stacking pallets 3 high, or if we have shelving 4 high, something like that. Those pallet crates, I mean, for like root vegetables and stuff. But concrete floors are super helpful. If we had found a place that had floor drains, that would have been, built-in floor drains, that would have been even better. But we did not find a facility like that. Another positive point of the Stahl's warehouse is that it has bay doors on it already. They're garage doors. I think when you say a bay door, you're actually talking about has a raised platform that you can back a truck up to. It does not have that. That would be even better. And with the hardware store, that does not have bay doors. So we were going to do new construction, as was the plan. We would definitely build in bay doors so that trucks could just back directly up and there's no lifting needed. Just things can roll right off the back. What else? Ample electric. The furniture store has, these kind of details are not my strong suit, but I mean, had really good juice on that building. Having that already built in is a huge plus. Whereas, again, the furniture store, we would need to upgrade for that. Plumbing is also a thing. We'd have to upgrade that on both buildings. The furniture warehouse did not have a need for any advanced plumbing. So, more ability to move water through and to be able to tie into sewage is all important. Another nice thing about the furniture warehouse is that it has a lot of space around it. So if we had access to the property, there's also a huge parking lot and some actually just open ground. So if we wanted to do on-site composting from the facility, we could do that. Again, the hardware store does not have that. Trying to think if there's anything else I missed. Are there any other parts of that that you would look for?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I guess the interesting one that the loading dock bay door is a nice to have and not a required, I think is interesting. And then just being in a place where you can get trucks in and out. I work with a lot of distributors. And so just that, you know, that there are smaller distributors that specialize in getting a few boxes of produce anywhere. Versus in order to, you know, sort of get that scale, it needs to be clean and, you know, wide roads and loading docks and stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. And then, you know, concrete floors and floor drainage would also be really good. So it aligns with what I was thinking. But it's kind of interesting to see where the priorities were and what was available.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that we'll find that we might need to adjust somehow to make those more like loading docks. Because I mean, what I envision is like the first few years we can get by, and that's sort of an upscale I've seen from a lot of other places like what you're talking about, where at some point they're like, all right, we can't keep we can't keep doing this of having trucks back up and then we're having to like lower things and it takes forever and it's not smooth. And yeah, the floor drains, I mean, it would be nice, but we're not going to find a place in Mount Pulaski that has that. So we're just going to have to cut them out of the floor, which will be expensive.
Well, and I mean, it might impact what you go to next, right? Wasn't your last slide like, you know, frozen produce or meat, or like you kind of need some of that for meat, and so like yes. what you move into will be, you know, also impacted.
Yep. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, so in that same vein, is there some, you know, what led your specialization into certain products, or do you have an intention to specialize in certain, you know, you said vegetables because of the producers and demand, would you specialize further?
Yeah, I mean, we got looking at, so we focused on produce because the farmers that were kind of in on the early ground floor of this, it was a lot of produce farmers. And we saw that the potential for that for sales too, just generally for produce to local institutions. But as far as specializing within that, it was then looking at things that you might consider to be more like commodity vegetables. Getting sweet corn around here is super easy. Getting non-GMO or organic sweet corn is a different thing. And I guess I should just say that here that like we're not in a position to mandate any kind of organic or other kind of standards for the produce coming in. One of the main farmers that's involved is certified organic. Prairie Earth Farm is a 40-acre farm just south of here. And they do all certified organic vegetables. But I mean, they were aware too that if we're going to try to be working with a lot of different producers, letting that go is going to be important. One of the biggest sweet corn farmers in our area, who's also on our board, is not certified organic. He does do non-GMO, but he sprays, and it's super duper difficult to grow sweet corn around here organically. I think that's true almost anywhere really, but especially here because there's so much corn grown here on heavy spray programs, that trying to have one corn crop that's not is hard. We do it for our heritage corn that we grow on our farm, but we get a nice isolated little plot, and we accept that we're going to have lower yields. I feel like I diverted from the question. Oh, commodity crops, so like super basic things that larger bios will want in bulk: sweet corn, bell peppers, broccoli. It's actually gotten our radar recently. We might be able to do potatoes. Potatoes can be grown on a pretty good scale around here, and there actually are a lot of frozen potato products. So just super basic stuff that a cafeteria might want. Does that answer the question? There might be more there, for sure.
Yeah, for me, it did.
Does how those crops stack on top of each other come into effect yet? So like when, things come off the field and your capacity to hold or to meet with farms?
Yeah, there'll definitely be a lot of planning around seasonal flux. Because yeah, I mean, there might be a time in the year, but that's part of the reason we need a lot of refrigerated storage and not just frozen storage. So you can wheel in like, oh, I forgot to mention, carrots would be a big thing. And that's particularly because that organic farmer I was talking about, they grow best carrots around, and they can grow them in bulk. And that's one of the crops they said they could definitely increase their production on. And it matched the interests of a lot of our buyers. Makes a decent frozen product. I mean, it kills me a little bit because I know that carrots also just store well whole in cold storage. But we're trying to meet the market a little more, and having them like lightly processed and frozen helps meet that market. Yeah, there'll be times in the year where, like, especially with carrots, we can bring them in and keep them cold for weeks or even like months, really, and process them as we have time to get them through the line. But I mean, as far as space and also staffing, there'll be a lot of planning or a lot of seasonal hiring for that as well. Yeah, it's funny because we're trying to beat seasonality a little bit, try to spread things out, but that means that we have to deal with seasonality instead of someone else. That's part of the deal.
Mhm. Yeah, and back goes all the way back to the drawing board. You're like, these are who I know are going to use the vegetables, and these who are producing them, and you had them early on invest, as partners, as thought leaders in the process. So where that just seems so key.
Yeah.
David dropped in a nice question in the chat. Do you see the orientation of the co-op shifting in the future from responding to existing supply demand to pushing new supply demand initiatives? For example, getting people to eat locally and then getting them to eating what's local and organic for the area.
I mean, that'd be cool. We have talked about, so one of the many things in that grant, this is leading to your question in a way, but also something I didn't mean to mention. Something that we built into the planning grant was to establish protocol for differentiating between organic and non-organic produce in the facility if that comes up. So we have a protocol in place ahead of time, because we would also potentially have the opportunity to do some custom processing for local growers. So again, if that organic farm that we're working with wants to have their own line of frozen carrot sticks, we can follow our protocol to clear the line, run organic produce through, and have it still remain as certified organic. And then we've offered a separate product line entirely from everything else. And we can do that with other products of other organic farms in the area as well, as long as we have that in place. But I mean, I would love to have the chance to make this be an opportunity to start having some of those other conversations of what else can come out of this. Not only is it healthier, if it's just fresh produce and it's local and it's good for the local economy, but also maybe we can get a few less sprays happening out there.
Yeah, and I was asking that partially in response to the difficulty of growing organic corn, but of course the massive demand for corn, and it's just like what people know to grow there. But are there farmers who are like, well, I wish I could do something else, but this is what this is where the demand is. And right. I wonder if the co-op is like small and flexible enough to address that and say, sure, like you can become a carrot farmer or chestnut farmer, or
Yeah, I'd love to see something that happens, just because we're on the example of carrots. Something that happens too is that, more farmers see the opportunity to grow a crop like that. And I mean, that's one of those crops that is easier on average to grow organically than, I mean, sweet corn is not even a fair example because it's so much more difficult. But it's easier on average, and I'd like to see a chance to empower other growers around here to do that. And not only just see that there's an opportunity in the market, but see if we could set up equipment sharing that kind of works through this cooperative. So they have, they grow acres and acres and acres of carrots, and they have a harvester for it, a digger. Be able to share that with other growers. Either we just help coordinate it, or we actually wind up owning equipment that we can move around to different fields. And then you have different farmers crop planting together. I mean, it's very idealistic as far as my practical brain goes, but oh God, trying to arrange to move equipment around between farms, and oh boy. But I would love for that to be an eventual outcome of this, that other farmers see, oh, I can grow vegetables. I would love to see that, as a conventional corn and bean grower around here, which is mostly what happens right here. They have a little field somewhere, like a little 4-acre field. Well, I could grow several rows of peppers over there. Maybe I get that ground certified at some point. Just start picking off little pieces, but I don't think that can happen without these market opportunities first. So I do definitely think of it as an entry point. That's the hope.
Hey, I have a question. Can I jump in here?
Please.
Sure.
I have been contemplating oil seeds for many years. I actually gave a talk at the NOFA Mass 2019 winter conference on sustainable fats and oils here in England. And I am not, I've been to grow them. It's so hard thinking about, I'm a conservation biologist, I'm a farmer and an educator. And so thinking about starting a business, going the cooperative route versus going the private route. I actually just recently just found this issue of the Natural Farmer Cooperative from fall 2019. And I am a cooperative-minded person. I was a member of a failed cooperative, Harvest Cooperative Supermarket, which went out of business 3 years ago. And I just know that running a nonprofit and running a cooperative, because I've been involved, it's so much extra work because of the structure. And can you hear me still? Okay, yeah, I'm just wondering what, just if you ever weighed those possibilities and what drove you to choose a cooperative model.
I think about this all the time. What's really funny is that the same time that we were talking about what kind of structure we were going to undertake, and cooperative was kind of coming up high on the list. We're owners of a grocery cooperative up just in Bloomington. Oh, can everyone else hear me? Eileen, if you turned off your video, it might help increase your bandwidth to actually hear it. I have that problem sometimes right here. I'll try to answer the question anyway. I hope you can hear me. We're owners of our grocery cooperative up in Bloomington, which is the city that's just north of us. And at the same time that we were looking at cooperative for this thing, that cooperative was having its second annual meltdown as an organization. It's constantly just weird, either infighting or caused by the stores struggling to make profit and all that kind of stuff. And it was just God, why am I starting another cooperative? This is the dumbest idea. I can't even make this one work. It already exists. But again, problems becoming opportunities. What can we learn from this cooperative so that we don't, remake the same problems again? It's a super important question, because now another example is that there's a food hub here, and I say food hub just because usually we think of food hubs, we think of nonprofits or we think of cooperatives or whatever. There's a private business near here that we sell some of our own farm products to. It's called Down at the Farms. It's part of Spence Farm. They sell up in Chicago, and they bring together a lot of farms. I mean, Bill used to work for Eva's Garden. This place is bringing together 10 times as many farms. I mean, it's tons of different farmers. but it's an LLC. It's a private business. He does not operate it as a cooperative. And I think one of the reasons is that he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to hear from other people about it, which is more like Kiva's. I mean, it's just, you just have a transactional relationship with the other farmers around you, and it works for everyone, and that's it. There's no other complications of a board or anything. And I get that. I mean, for our own farm, we're wanting to start our own grain mill. Finally, we get our grain milled by someone who's 2.5 hours away. We need to establish our own mill at some point. And I just helped form this cooperative, and I'm like, grain cooperative, that sounds really good. But then also, God, it's so much work to get it together. You have to report to a board again, and you have to get all the owners, and it'd be so much easier if it was just private. And that's probably the route we're going to take for it, because it's going to be primarily us using it. And then I hope that we can just do some custom processing for other small grain farmers in our area. It's simpler, it's cleaner. It does not help you meet some more philosophical objectives, I guess, and social objectives. It's just it's a choice you have to make at some point. And I can talk about the ups and downs of it all, but it's just you have to decide whether it's the right thing for you or not. If it feels like you can't find enough great people to get on board, then I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't form a cooperative.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Actually, for some reason, my connection went out when you first started talking. I'm going to have to go back and listen to what you said. But thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry about that. Are there any other questions in the chat? I haven't been looking.
Jeff, I have a somewhat mundane question, but just curious how you deal with price point, both on your end and working with a lot of different farmers.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to lay the groundwork for that by in those early interviews that we did. We were asking very specific questions about what price points, what was the lowest price point that producers were comfortable with, and not like what helps you break even, but like what actually works for a business. Because I don't want to be in the position of ripping farmers off. That's exactly the opposite point. But that's how I think this goes a lot. You get top-down pressure for wholesale producers to always be cutting costs and make it work on your end instead of on the buyer's end. So what price was the lowest that actually fit their business model? And then talking to these institutional buyers, school districts, hospitals, and finding out what was the most that they would pay that fits their budgets. And the margin in between there, our cut in between, small. And we've been very upfront with our community of owners that we're not going to be profitable for 5 years, 10 years. It's going to be a long slog of trying to make that work for everyone, and that's just how it is. So then it's incumbent upon us to keep ourselves lean and mean so that we can make the best use of that small margin. So does that? I mean, there's more kids and cats. Yeah, that's the philosophy behind it. Is that we're just going to have to make it work, and it's tough, and we're going to have to expect a lot of our buyers, honestly, to make this work for their community.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes, just 2 or 3 for another couple of questions.
Look at the chat itself.
I wonder, do you expect all the produce that you deal with to be coming from a certain radius around and also kind of sold within that same radius, or do you expect to tap into something like down at the farms to get things further out where you might have a higher price point?
In terms of where we're buying or selling?
Well, I guess I'm wondering if you expect the buying and selling radius to be the same, or if you expect to buy local and sell further out which is kind of what Down at the Farm does.
I would love if the buying and selling radius was the same. And the way I usually think about that is that for a couple of reasons, I've finally settled on a county by county delineation of what Central Illinois is. Just a very discrete map. This is the region, and it's just that it's it's the waste of Central Illinois. It's midsection, and I would love for those to match. That being said, there is a power to larger population centers than what we have available here, in terms of both how much you can move and how much you can sell it for. So yeah, this is PJ. And we might have to take advantage of that just to make this all work for us. And I mean, it might be, you know, if we could be moving stuff through Marty Travis's farm, through Down at the Farms, he might have access to larger buyers that are willing to pay more, or small amounts that for a premium price, of just good basic stuff from Central Illinois. Ideally, I would love for Central Illinois to be feeding itself, which it doesn't do to such a ridiculous, painful degree for how much farming we do here. We import like 95% of our food or something. It's absurd. So I'd love to be a part of fixing that. So that's the goal. I mean, I know it's rural. There's a lot of people here still. There's plenty of people to feed. You just have to get to them.
Yeah. Any last minute thoughts? How would we best, follow your work or reach out to you moving on after this?
You can send me a personal email. It's jeffreythake@gmail.com. I think you guys have that too. Feel free to write me. As David knows, I spend a lot of time on Facebook. Feel free to add me. It's just Jeff Hake. And then you'll be able to, and then the co-op is FarmFED Co-op. Just all one word, lowercase, on Instagram and Facebook. Our farm is on Instagram and Facebook as Funks Grove HFG. What else? I love corresponding by email, so that's probably the best way to reach me. And then if you want to reach Cindy or like the actual manager of the cooperative, it's farmfedcoop@gmail.com. Yeah, and feel free to reach out. I love talking about this stuff, obviously. So I'm happy to talk more. There's so much I don't know, and there's so much we haven't done yet, but I want to be as helpful as possible because this shit's real important to me.
Thank you for all the work that you're doing and sharing your time with us and for your presentation. As we wrap up here, I just have a couple of more announcements. We have an evaluation that we would really appreciate you filling out, and we'll just drop that link down here in the chat. As well, we have a vendor marketplace. We hope you can go check them out. There's some really good, generous discount codes available from them. Again, that link is available down here in the chat and in the program book. The virtual auction we have running up until Sunday evening is live. So go check out some of those cool items, including the Soil Food Web Schools Foundation courses, a palette of organic soil, some other great stuff, cheese and oysters and books, something for everybody. That is going live right now and through Sunday evening at 6 p.m. So keep your eye on those things that you're bidding on. As well, this session qualifies for 1.5 continuing education credits if you're an accredited organic land care professional. And we have 2 more sessions coming up this afternoon and a whole day including our keynote speaker, Precious Fury, tomorrow, and 2 large roundtable sessions. So we encourage you to join us there tomorrow and for the rest of the day today. As well, do keep track of your program book. You can refresh it for the most up-to-date links and for contact information for all the presenters. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone, and I will see you at the next workshop. I'll keep
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. Thanks everyone for your comments and engagement.
So I'll keep the window open for a couple more minutes as you're looking at those links, and I'll just keep it open. So feel free to hang out for a second.
And everyone, make sure to grab that evaluation link too. It's the same link for everything. It'll just give you the drop down for for this session.
Cool.
Well, I'm gonna have some lunch and then we're going to work in the woods again, getting ready for syrup season.
Oh yeah.
When does your
Chainsaw.
do you have tapping now and start tap in like January? Like
It depends. I mean, we have tapped this early before, but it wasn't great. We're getting our cold season really late. It didn't get cold until around Christmas. We're getting the tubing ready right now. So we're just doing all the repairs and such. There's another cold snap coming up, and then maybe we'll be tapping in February. Usually we're ready by March. We have syrup available for sale by March.
Yeah, check out all the wild stuff Jeff's making out there with the ramp, and I still got to get that ramp maple seasoning.
Yeah.
It sounds.
Send me your address. I'll send you some.
I'll send you some dollars and you can send me some. I just gotta remember to do it.
good.
All right, thanks all.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, talk to you soon.